comment on why in Europe are the European governments sacrificing their economies and their social spending to give money to the U.S. hegemony and increase their military spending? I don't understand why the politicians and the people put up with it. And the second part is, how can you and Medea Benjamin and Nicholas Davies and Jeffrey Sachs and others, David Swanson and others, get out the same message that the U.S. provoked this war in Ukraine, but it's very hard to get covered in the mainstream media. So comment on both expanding our people out of our, more people understand the message, and why European countries are bending over for Uncle Sam.
Yeah, no, this is a good question. I think this is also why there's a lot, not just economic upheaval, but also political upheaval across Europe now. All the major countries, be it Britain, France, Germany, the political elites have lost much of support in the polling. There's a lot of political instability. And I think part of the reason is indeed that they're no longer pursuing national interest and security interest. And this is causing much concern in the population. Now, why they're bending over backwards for the United States, I guess, many people would look to issues, for example, international institutions, that a lot of failed politicians on the national level, they have more opportunities in international institutions. So, for example, our previous Prime Minister, Jens Stoltenberg, he kind of proved himself to the Americans by in the Libyan war, as Norway dropped, I think, about 10% of the bombs on Libya. So he was made the new Secretary General of NATO. Now he's going out, and it's worth seeing then how the new Rutte, who is the former Dutch Prime Minister, also because of corruption problems, was booted. But then in the end of his term, he made sure that he took a very hard stance against the Palestinians, hard stance against the Russians, and of course joined in on bombing of Yemen in order to win over the affection of Washington. So now he will be the new NATO Secretary General. So you can look at some of the differences between the national and international level. But I think overall, I often lean, again, what I talked about, which is ideology, because after World War II, throughout European history, we always had, well, a lot of conflicts is no secret on this continent. But after World War II, there was a sense of stability under US leadership. And then at the end of the Cold War, we very much embraced this ideology of the end of history or perpetual peace. But of course, we had hoped that there would be a collective hegemony. That is, Western hegemon would be based on two pillars, which was the US and the EU. And this would be how the world would be organized. Now, my argument is I think we lack the political imagination now that the era of unipolarity has come to an end. How will we organize Europe and world politics? I don't think we have any more political imagination. Our first instinct is to seek refuge again under US leadership, as we've done since the Second World War. And I don't think we're prepared for the new system, because when you have emergence of a multipolar system, the first thing you have to do is diversify your economic connectivity, have many partners. Because once you become too dependent on a partner which is more powerful than you, there's very asymmetrical interdependence. So you will see then the Europeans develop more and more dependence on the US and become less and less economic competitive. And we now cut ourselves off the Russians. We're being asked to cut ourselves off Chinese technologies. So our economies are becoming very inefficient, and all our dreams of political autonomy, and we spoke of strategic autonomy and European independence for a long time. This is out the window. So this will be quite devastating, and I think was also quite obvious from the beginning of these sanctions that the Europeans would carry the brunt, because a lot of our industries were dependent on import of reliable and cheap Russian energy, and then being able to export to their market. And what I guess also the lack of political imagination is also the new world we're facing, because for the past 300 years, whenever the Russians wanted to modernize, they always had to Europeanize, look west to modernize. And we could always try to push them back into Asia, where they would remain backwards and not a concern to us. This is what we openly said was the French and the British when they fought the Russians in the Crimean War in the 1850s, and this is kind of the goal now as well. The problem now is that many of the largest and more dynamic economies are now in Asia. So since 2014, the Russians began to reorient their economy more towards the east in what they call Greater Eurasia. And as a result, we see that the Russians are able to diversify away from the Europeans, but the Europeans aren't really able to diversify away from Russia, which is why our energy, our technologies, our industries are suffering greatly. So I wish there would be more discussion, but again, if you open any European newspaper, all we read is everything is simplified and dumbed down to our liberal democracy and their authoritarianism and why we can't make any peace with them. So I think peace with Russia is not to do the Russians any favors. I think it would do ourselves a great favor, not just in terms of security, but also political independence and economic prosperity.